Let's start with probably the most shocking assessment we've seen recently. Intelligence reports indicate Russia has fully, completely transitioned to a war economy.
And the output numbers are just, well, staggering.
Yeah, staggering is the word. We're talking an estimated 3 million artillery shells produced annually.
Annually.
Annually. And just to put that in perspective for you, listing that single number, it's nearly 3 times the combined output of the United States and all European nations. Combined.
It's a massive difference in scale right now.
And it's not just about feeding the war in Ukraine, is it? That's the scary part.
No, not at all. The intelligence suggests new weapon systems are being deliberately stockpiled, held back.
To equip what? A massively expanded army, something like 1.5 million personnel.
That's the assessment. An army seemingly being prepared for a potential high-intensity conflict with NATO.
And the timeline they're looking at, it's not some far-off future problem. We're talking, what, 2028 to 2030?
That appears to be the window of maximum danger analysts are pointing to. It's closer than many might think.
Welcome to NationScope Podcast. Join us as we dive deep into the latest headlines, the breaking stories, and really the critical events shaping America and the world. Today, we are analyzing a comprehensive report that lays out Russia's trajectory towards confrontation. It seems driven just as much by economic timelines as by military buildup.
Yeah, and we're going to unpack the strategic thinking behind that aggressive timeline. We'll look at how Russia's economy is maybe surprisingly resilient right now, but also how it's fundamentally flawed long term.
And crucially, that geographic choke point.
That's right. We'll identify that single vulnerability, often called NATO's Achilles heel, that planners worry Russia could try to seize incredibly quickly, perhaps in under 72 hours. So stay with us as we dig into this really critical assessment.
Okay, so let's start with the basics, the foundational evidence. The sheer scale of Russia's military-industrial mobilization. The sources are really clear. This goes way beyond just replacing losses in Ukraine.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just about patching holes. It's full-scale expansion. Aimed at a peer adversary, no question.
So what's the hard evidence? How do we see this shift to a war economy in practice?
Well, the commitment is, frankly, total. Look at the manpower figures. The defense sector in Russia now employs about 4.5 million people.
4.5 million?
Yeah. And get this. That's roughly 20%, one-fifth of all manufacturing jobs in the entire country now dedicated to military production.
20%? Wow.
You really have to go back to the Cold War to see that kind of industrial focus in Russia. It shows the entire state has reoriented itself around military output above, well, pretty much everything else.
That's a massive structural shift. And the production numbers themselves, they back this up, right? This isn't just about jobs.
No, the output is real, and it's jumped dramatically. Take main battle tanks, for instance. Monthly production went from maybe 40 in late 2022 to over 130 by the summer of 2024.
More than tripled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And think about those 3 million artillery rounds we mentioned. That capacity isn't just for today. It's being built to equip entirely new, larger formations that haven't even deployed to Ukraine yet.
And looking forward, their 2025 goals.
Ambitious. They're aiming for nearly 2,500 high-precision missiles. Think Iskander, Kinzhal variants. 57 modern combat aircraft, like the Su-57, and 250 new T-90M tanks.
These are complex, modern systems.
Very. They take time, specialized skills, significant industrial resources, and they're clearly diverting those resources to make them happen.
So if they're building this new arsenal, they obviously need the people to operate it. I was struck by the force generation numbers. The sources say Russia's ground forces have expanded hugely, almost doubled.
Yeah, from about 280,000 personnel back in 2021 to around 550,000 by early 2025. A massive increase.
But here's the really telling part, the indicator of strategic intent, perhaps. Where are these new soldiers actually going?
And that's the absolute critical clue. You're right. Intelligence suggests that since mid-2025, newly recruited manpower is actually being withheld from the Ukrainian front.
Withheld, so not sent into the current fight.
Correct. Specifically held back to be trained and equipped as a new strategic reserve for a, quote, future contingency.
If Ukraine was the only priority, you'd expect them to be rushed right to the front lines.
Precisely. But they're being reserved, held back.
And the weapons match that pattern, the new high-value stuff.
Same pattern. Moscow seems to be deliberately keeping its newly produced, most advanced equipment away from the current front lines. They're actively stockpiling it.
For a future conflict elsewhere. It's hard to interpret that any other way than preparing for a fight with a more advanced military, like NATO.
And it's not just about quantity. They're adapting, learning lessons from Ukraine. Their doctrine is evolving.
How so?
New priorities. A huge focus now on tactical drones, sophisticated electronic warfare EW systems, which are vital for countering Western tech advantages, and improving logistics, which was a major failing early in the Ukraine invasion.
They're learning from their mistakes.
They are, and they're institutionalizing it. Russia plans to open a dedicated higher military school specifically for unmanned systems forces in 2027.
Wow, that's not a short-term fix. That signals a long-term technological and doctrinal commitment way beyond the current war.
Exactly.
Okay, so if this war machine is expanding at such a rate, how on earth are they paying for it? The 2025 budget you mentioned tells a story.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It's the Kremlin's financial statement of intent. They've allocated a staggering 15.5 trillion rubles to military spending.
15.5 trillion. What does that mean in, like, real terms? GDP.
That works out to about 7.2% of their total GDP. 7.2%.
That's enormous. How does that compare to, say, social spending?
It completely eclipses spending on education and healthcare combined. It's a stark choice.
A clear signal, then. Permanent war footing. Prioritizing military hardware over almost everything else for their citizens.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. They've gotten quite sophisticated at insulating this war effort economically, despite facing massive Western sanctions.
How are they managing that? What does that insulation look like? How are they keeping the money and materials flowing?
Well, first, there's the direct sanction dodging. The most visible example is the use of that ghost ship tanker fleet to keep exporting oil and maintain energy revenues. That's crucial cash flow.
Okay, so they're finding ways around the oil sanctions, but what else?
The bigger structural change is what the report calls the axis of upheaval. This strategic alignment they've really solidified with China, Iran, and North Korea.
Right, the axis of upheaval. Let's break that down. How does this alliance, this division of labor, allow Russia to keep its advanced defense industry churning?
It's key to bypassing the most effective sanctions, particularly on components. Russia has essentially outsourced production of low-tech, high-volume stuff.
Like artillery shells.
Exactly. Millions of shells coming from North Korea. Thousands of relatively inexpensive but effective drones coming from Iran.
Okay, so they get the basic munitions from partners. And that does what for Russia's own industry?
It frees up Russia's own Advanced Defense Industrial Base, their DIB, to focus almost entirely on the high-value, complex systems, the things they can't easily import.
Modern tanks, advanced aircraft, hypersonic missiles, the things needed to fight a peer competitor.
Precisely. And then there's a third partner, China. They provide absolutely essential dual-use technologies.
Like microchips.
Microelectronics, yes. And advanced machine tools. Things vital for actually building those sophisticated Russian weapon systems. Without those Chinese components, many of Russia's production lines for advanced missiles, for example, would likely grind to a halt.
That paints a picture of a surprisingly resilient war economy adapted for sanctions. But the reports also flag a major issue, right? A strategic paradox. The whole thing is overheating.
That's exactly right. The pump is definitely primed, the output is high, but the underlying engine is straining badly. You see high inflation domestically, very high interest rates trying to control it, and a really severe labor shortage.
Made worse by the mobilization and people leaving the country.
Made much worse, yes. Both mobilization, pulling men out of the workforce, and the exodus of skilled workers who simply don't want to live under a war economy. This level of military spending just cannot be sustained indefinitely without either eventual structural collapse or, at minimum, a severe degradation of the non-military parts of the economy.
Okay, so if the surge is powerful but temporary, that forces a kind of deadline, doesn't it? It implies there's a window where Russia feels it has maximum advantage.
And that's precisely where the 2028-2030 timeline comes from. The current surge is huge, but it's based on an unsustainable economic model. This period, the next 3 to 5 years, likely represents their window of maximum advantage.
Before their economy peaks and starts to decline, and before NATO catches up.
Exactly. Before their economic advantages erode, and crucially, before NATO's own, currently quite sluggish, defense industrial base finally ramps up significantly. The strategic logic, from Moscow's perspective, might dictate that they must act during this window to exploit their current relative military strength before it fades.
Which brings us straight to NATO's biggest vulnerabilities. Specifically, that geographic choke point, Russia seems obsessed with practicing attacks on the Suwałki Gap.
The Suwałki Gap. It's often called NATO's Achilles heel, and for very good reason.
Yeah.
You really need to picture the map here. It's a relatively narrow strip of land, only about 100 kilometers or 65 miles long.
running along the border between Poland and Lithuania.
Correct. Mostly flat, sparsely populated land. But its strategic importance is just immense. It is the only land bridge connecting the Baltic states, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, to Poland and the rest of the NATO alliance.
The only land route for reinforcements or supplies.
The only one. If Russia were to seize control of that corridor, it would physically isolate 3 NATO members, cut them off by land completely.
And we know this isn't just some abstract threat assessment. The sources confirm Russian military exercises like the Zapad series repeatedly simulate this exact scenario.
Consistently. They rehearse launching a pincer movement.
Right.
One arm attacking from the heavily militarized Russian exclave of Kaliningrad on the Baltic Sea, the other coming from allied Belarus to the east, squeezing the gap shut.
So what would an actual attempt look like? The scenario planners suggest a multi-stage assault designed for speed, right? To create a political fait accompli.
Yes, speed and shock are critical to the concept. It likely starts with phase 1, a hybrid prelude.
Meaning?
Intensified destabilization. Not necessarily overt military action at first. Think little green men, unmarked operatives stirring trouble, massive cyber attacks targeting critical infrastructure, not just in the Baltics or Poland, but maybe across Europe to cause chaos. Perhaps weaponizing migration flows again to distract and create political division, sowing confusion.
Softening the target, creating a pretext, then phase 2.
Then comes a kinetic punch. Phase 2, the short warning assault. This would be a very rapid, combined arms attack, fast-moving, armored units punching through from Kaliningrad and Belarus simultaneously.
Supported by GEM.
Overwhelming electronic warfare to jam communications and sensors, plus long-range precision strikes, likely using Iskander missiles to hit command centers, air defenses, and reinforcements trying to move up. The goal, according to the analysis, is to physically seize and control the corridor in under 72 hours.
72 hours. 3 days before NATO can fully react.
Before NATO could likely even agree politically on a response, let alone mobilize and deploy heavy forces needed for a counterattack. Speed is absolutely paramount to the plan.
And then the final phase, consolidation. This involves the nuclear threat, doesn't it?
Yes, and this is perhaps the most dangerous element. Phase 3, consolidation and coercion. Russia would immediately deploy dense anti-accessory denial systems, A2AD bubbles, basically.
The S-400 air defense system.
Exactly. Creating a heavily defended zone over the gap and surrounding areas, making it incredibly costly and difficult for NATO aircraft or missiles to operate. Imagine a lethal keep-out zone.
And then they issue the threat.
Then they issue explicit threats of nuclear escalation to deter any NATO attempt to forcibly reopen the corridor. The goal isn't necessarily permanent occupation initially, it's political.
To present NATO with an irreversible situation on the ground and dare them to risk nuclear war to undo it, proving Article 5 is hollow.
That's the nightmare scenario. To shatter NATO's credibility, even if NATO did decide to fight, a conventional battle to retake the gap would likely be incredibly bloody. A high-attrition stalemate.
Leading not to a clear victory, but maybe some kind of forced, ugly, bruising armistice.
Exactly. Leaving Europe in a permanently unstable, much more dangerous state, a kind of hot or cold war.
So, faced with this calculated near-term threat scenario, how is NATO responding? We know the rhetoric has changed. Russia is officially the most significant and direct threat. There are new regional defense plans, more troops under direct NATO command.
Around 40,000 troops now under direct SASIR command, yes. And the political adaptation, the recognition of the threat is definitely there. They've woken up, politically speaking.
That's always a but.
But there's a huge critical gap between that political ambition, the deterrence by declaration, and the actual military-industrial reality, the deterrence by capability.
The hardware isn't matching the strategy yet.
Not even close.
Yeah.
In some key areas, NATO has set a new, very ambitious target of potentially aiming for 5% of GDP combined on defense and security investments for frontline states.
5%, that's a massive jump.
It is. But many allies are still struggling to consistently meet the old 2% GDP target for defense spending. So there's a big credibility gap on funding commitment right from the start.
And that lack of sustained funding commitment translates directly into slow production, right? That huge gap in artillery shell production we started with. Why can't the combined industrial might of Europe and the U.S. match Russia's output?
The report describes European rearmament, bluntly, as sluggish. It's a mix of systemic problems. Decades of underinvestment mean the industrial base just isn't there at scale for things like mass shell production.
Companies need long-term orders.
Exactly. Defense companies aren't going to invest billions in new factories without guaranteed government contracts stretching out for years, even decades. Peacetime procurement processes are slow, they're fragmented across different nations. It wasn't built for rapid, massive rearmament.
And logistics, moving troops and gear.
Also a bottleneck. Things like European rail capacity, different track gauges, paperwork aren't optimized for quickly moving heavy brigades across borders to the east. So overall, the production of key things like shells, air defense interceptors, precision munitions, it falls drastically short of what's needed for a major conflict, and critically short of what Russia is churning out right now.
So the industrial gap is one major concern. The other factor the reports highlight is politics. Specifically, potential political shifts, maybe in the U.S.
Yes, the political variable is crucial. The reports note that political unpredictability, particularly any rhetoric suggesting wavering U.S. commitment to NATO or Article 5, while that creates a potential strategic opening for Moscow.
Tempting Putin to test the alliance's resolve.
It could. Any perception, real or manufactured, of fractured NATO unity or American disengagement, especially during that critical 2028-2030 window, it might just convince Putin that the risks of a limited aggression, like seizing the Suwałki Gap, are acceptable. If he thinks the U.S. might hesitate, the whole deterrent calculation changes dramatically in his favor.
Okay, so pulling this all together, if the window of maximum danger is indeed opening in the next few years, what are the urgent takeaways? What must NATO do now, according to this analysis?
The recommendations are pretty clear and consistent. First, accelerate defense industrial production. Like yesterday, focus on joint procurement across allies for those critical items. Artillery shells, air defense interceptors, long-range precision munitions. Send those long-term demand signals to industry now.
Close that gap with Russia's output. Second,
solidify the eastern flank for real. Move beyond just rotational forces. Establish permanent brigade-sized heavy armored units actually based in the Baltic states and Poland, with pre-positioned stockpiles of ammunition, fuel, and spare parts. Deterrence needs to be credible and in place, not just promised.
Visible, immediate deterrence. And the third main area, it's not just military.
No, it has to be broader. Strengthen societal resilience. Adopt a whole-of-society approach. That means enhancing cyber protection for critical national infrastructure, developing coordinated strategies to counter disinformation during that hybrid prelude phase.
And even civil defense.
And even reviving civil defense preparedness programs, making societies more resilient to the disruption and coercion that would likely precede any actual military move. It's about preparing for the entire spectrum of the threat, hybrid, and kinetic. When you step back, this deep dive really shows that Russia's path seems driven by this strange strategic paradox. They feel they need to act while their temporary economic militarized surge gives them what they perceive as maximum advantage.
Before the window closes.
Before the window closes. And for us, for the democracies in NATO, this raises a really fundamental, frankly uncomfortable question. What are the limits? What sacrifices are democracies actually willing to make in terms of social spending, healthcare, education budgets to effectively counter an autocratic state that's running a full-throttle, pretty ruthless war economy? That's the new, very hard cost of security in Europe today.
You've been listening to Nation Scope Podcast, where we analyze the stories shaping America and the world. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.